Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about some of the different things we learned from week 0 and some of the things that maybe just be a little bit more overreaction than anything else. But I do want to get into my hot takes as we head into the 2024 season. This is something that probably should have done about a week ago before we got into week 0, but I figure before week 1 is plenty of time. So let's get into this real quick, and I have a couple on here that I have a feeling are going to be not so well received, if I had to imagine. And the first one I want to start with is I think Kyren Lacy might just lead the country in receiving yards. And this one's a little bit taller of an order because when you go outside the Power 4, there are some guys like Ricky White and Torrey Horton that might just cause some problems for this. But at the end of the day, when I look at what Kyren Lacy is in this offense, I don't know if there's another wide receiver in this offense that is going to be able to take the pressure off of him. I don't think C.J. Daniels is the guy that everyone really wanted him to be down there in Baton Rouge. I think he's a good player. I think he's more of a wide receiver 3 than a wide receiver 2. I think Chris Hilton's a really good player. I think he's more of a wide receiver 3 than a wide receiver 2. And I think Adam Anderson is going to be a guy that is going to make plenty of plays, but at the end of the day, Kyren Lacy is going to be the guy. He's going to be the absolute go-to guy pretty much throughout this entire season. And I think when you look at him, the frame is absolutely ridiculous, big, physical, absolutely someone that is a red zone threat, but also he can kind of go. He can get out of a break and really burn someone on a deep route. And Garrett Nussmeier can throw those deep balls pretty beautifully. Now, Nussmeier has had a little bit of trouble with turnovers throughout fall camp, and it's something that we'll talk about when we preview that LSU-USC game. But at the end of the day, I do think they're going to be able to figure this out. I do think that Garrett Nussmeier is going to be a really good quarterback this year, and even with guys like Luther Burden and Tatori McMillan and all of the incredible receivers all around the country, I think Lacy has a little bit more on his shoulders this year. I think he knows that, and I think he's going to make a number of huge plays for this LSU team that might have to be just a little bit more pass-heavy this year because obviously you don't have the quarterback run game you did a year ago, but also you don't necessarily have the running back room that you love as they've had in the past a number of different ways. So that's one that I'm watching very, very closely and one that I think is going to be really fun to watch because that guy is really fun to watch play. So cannot wait to see what that guy does on the field, and it'll start on Sunday when they face off against USC. But moving on, I don't think Washington makes a bowl game. I think this is a program that is going to be good. I think when you bring in someone like Jedd Fisch, it's a fantastic head coach, a really good offensive system, and a guy that has every ability to get a ton of really good developmental guys in that room because of his ties to the NFL. So I think they're going to be good in the long run. There's just too much change in this roster to make me feel any type of confidence about what they can do because it's not like you're rebuilding, one side of the ball. It's not like you're rebuilding a couple of position groups here and there. It's pretty much across the board. You have to figure out an entirely new system, entirely new personnel, entirely new system in terms of how you're going to deal with these players. There's a million different things that are bouncing around that program, and I think you look at the schedule, it's not the craziest thing in the world by any means. They definitely have the ability to get to 6 wins and possibly make a bowl game, but you're 130th in the country at 134 teams in returning production and have done some good things through the portal, but just not enough. I like Will Rogers. I think he's a good player, but at the end of the day, I do not see him starting throughout this year for Washington. I think he gets a little bit ugly early on, and I think Damon Williams Jr., the talented freshman, likely takes over at some point. So, and the big thing of this is, starting on October 5th, they have at Rutgers, Michigan, at Iowa, at Indiana, USC, at Penn State, UCLA, and at Oregon. It's going to be really hard to find 2 or 3 wins in that thing. It's going to be really hard to go to Rutgers, go all the way across the country, and beat a team that's not going to hand you much. That Michigan game is going to be a nightmare for a number of reasons. At Iowa, you're facing a defense that might just be able to stop you and have you score 3 points that game. And then at Indiana is a very sketchy one. USC, I think, is going to be tough. At Penn State and at Oregon, obviously, are going to be really tough games. So overall, I think this is a team that very capable, has a lot of things in place to possibly make some noise this upcoming year. I just think they're going to start a little bit more rocky than they want. I think they're going to put in that freshman quarterback and then just kind of ride out the rest of the season and then maybe hit the ground running in 2025. But first year for Jedd Fisch, I don't think it's all that pretty in Seattle. Moving on, I think Georgia versus Florida, I think will end up being a top 20 game. And this one might be a little bit less hot when you look at that Florida schedule. I think they could go 5-2 and still be a top 20 team when this thing comes around, and that would include losses to maybe Tennessee and maybe Texas A&M, but there's a number of other teams that could get in their way. Obviously, that Miami game is huge, and frankly, if this were to happen, I might need them to win this weekend against Miami. We'll make that pick tomorrow, but at the end of the day, they have Tennessee, they have UCF, they have Kentucky at home, so it'll be interesting to watch this unfold. There's no doubt about that. I think there's a number of games that are big-time toss-ups for this Florida team, but let's say they win in week 1, and then they dominate Samford in week 2, and then A&M's coming to town, and maybe A&M has a loss on their schedule, or maybe they're riding high off a Notre Dame win and coming to Gainesville just a little bit soft, a little bit not ready for that game, and they're able to steal that one. Then you're off running, and things get really, really interesting. I'm not too worried about Georgia. I think even if they lose to Texas and Alabama before this game, I think they're likely still a top 15 or 20 team. So overall, I think this is going to be a really fun game, and I think when it comes around, it's going to have a ton of implications. By the time the end of the season comes, it might have a lot less implications because of the way Florida ends it, but I do think Florida will start strong and make this game really, really fun in Jacksonville. Moving on, I don't think any team in their new conference is going to win it in their first year. This is something that was obvious when I made my conference picks, but Utah, Texas, and Oregon are the teams that everyone's really watching, and Utah has the best shot to win their conference. They are definitely the team that comes in and says, we can win absolutely every game on the schedule, no doubt about it. But at the end of the day, Cam Rising does have to stay healthy, and it's been quite a while since he's been able to stay healthy. Obviously, not making any bets based on injuries, but it's definitely something that could get in their way. And also, I think the changes in the Big 12 were a little bit bigger than some people are giving them credit for, and I think Utah might not be able to play the brand of football they were able to play in the Pac-12, where it's just, we're going to lean on you and lean on you and lean on you until you quit. So it'll be interesting to watch, but don't necessarily love Utah in the Big 12 race. Moving on to Texas, I think this one, obviously you have the advantageous schedule, at least in SEC terms. Not necessarily easy, but easier than everyone else around you. I can promise you that. And then I don't know really when it comes down to it. You know, when they're playing UGA or Alabama or Ole Miss in Atlanta, are they going to be able to make the plays is the big time question that I have. And throughout the year, you know, there's going to be so many different environments that are going to be able to possibly trip them up, whether it's going up to Fayetteville and playing Arkansas or playing a couple of these teams on the road, going up to Michigan. There are enough games on this schedule that will definitely be able to trip this team up, and I think they might just go 10-2. Maybe they make the conference championship, but if you're playing Georgia and Atlanta, it's going to be a tall order. I can promise you that. But moving on to Oregon, this is the team that looks the most complete of the bunch, right? This is the team that has the most talent, that the roster just looks the most clean from top to bottom. But I think the difference in style as they walk into the Big Ten is being a little bit undersold. They're going to play a totally different offense than pretty much everyone else in the conference, and it's not that they can't be successful with that, but it does mean against Ohio State and Michigan, where maybe their defense are capable of stopping your offense, they're going to be able to slow down those games. They're going to be able to run the ball pretty effectively, and if that's the case, then it's going to be really hard to walk into Ann Arbor and get a win. Or it's going to be really hard for even Ohio State to walk into your building and you to beat them. So it's going to be really interesting to watch that one unfold. I don't love Oregon in that. I do think they're going to be a really good team and make the playoff. I'm not necessarily burying Oregon, but at the end of the day, I do think some of those changes going into the Big Ten are going to be a little bit more precarious than some people are expecting, at least for Oregon. And then moving on, I think the season this upcoming year will lessen the portal usage going forward. And I don't know how much it will lessen it. I think this could be one that kind of unfolds over the next couple of seasons, but it's something I've talked about a lot. You know, this season with all of the changes and all of the differences and so many different transfer quarterbacks all around the country, maybe continuity wins out. Maybe it's the Georgias, the Texas, the Ohio States, even with a new quarterback, and the Oregons, even with a new quarterback, that have the ability to be standing there at the end because they have the depth, because they have guys from high school that have been there for a couple of years, that have developed, that fully understand their offense or their defense. So I think that's the biggest thing that I'm kind of taking away from this season is you have so many changes. You have so many new teams like Ole Miss, Miami, all of these incredible teams that absolutely are looking to make some noise this upcoming year. And frankly, I think a number of them will. But Will they be able to be standing there at the end of the day holding the trophy? I don't necessarily love that. And I do think there's a world where you get to February, you get to March, and everyone's kind of looking around that player personnel department and saying, maybe it's worth it. Just put a little bit more energy into high school recruiting, start to build up the depth of this roster, and then say, okay, let's go pick and choose our guys out of the portal. I've always thought that's the way to go about business, and I think team building out of the portal, as we just saw with Florida State on Saturday, is a very precarious conversation. So it's going to be really interesting to watch this one. This one might be a little bit longer of a burn than I initially thought, but at the end of the day, I do think there will be some conversations at the end of the year that'll just say, maybe we just push a little bit more into high school recruiting, pull a little bit back from the portal, and then pick our spots in a couple of years when we have a lot of the other things set. So it'll be really interesting to watch that unfold. But then finally, likely my hottest one of the bunch, I just realized I forgot to change the caption here. I apologize for that. But Quinn Ewers, I think, is going to run away with the Heisman this year. And this one is definitely a very hot take because there are so many good quarterbacks around the country, so many incredible running backs and wide receivers that want to be heard from, but I think he's going to put up silly numbers this upcoming year. The amount of weapons and speed in particular that Texas has is just outright incredible. And it's not one of those teams in the past couple of years where if you take Xavier Worthy out of the game plan, if you were able to do that, which not a lot of people were, but if you were able to do that against Texas, you felt pretty good about where you were standing. Now, they still have Adonai Mitchell, they still had Jordan Whittington, they still had dudes out there, but Xavier Worthy was a huge part of this offense. He was the catalyst. There's no two ways about that. Texas now has about 3 or 4 guys that can fit into that role. The 3 or 4 guys that could have 600 yards this upcoming season, but none of them top 1,000. Or a couple of guys that could have 40 receptions this upcoming year, but none of them top 60. It's going to be a lot about spreading the ball around, especially with the running back troubles that they've been having. It's going to be a lot of the ball just in Quinn Ewers' hands time and again. And we're going to see if he's going to be able to make those steps from last year where the deep ball was not there. The deep ball was not nearly where it needed to be, and a lot of that was footwork and timing and a lot of very niche things that affected those passes. So we'll see if he's taken that step forward. I tend to believe he has. It seems like he's been doing an incredible job in this offense throughout the offseason, and I think there's just a lot of things lining up for him. The talent that he's going to have on the outside, both at wide receiver and tight end. The running back problems puts the ball in his hand just a little bit more often than it would before, and I think being a third-year player in a Steve Sarkisian offense is a pretty special thing, tends to be. So I've talked about it before. I think it could be a Mac Jones type season, but there won't be a Devontae Smith having 2,000 yards to kind of steal that Heisman away from him. So I do think Quinn Ewers kind of runs away with the Heisman, and by the time we get to NYC, it's something of a formality because we know Quinn Ewers' name is going to be called, and we know he's going to be lifting that trophy. So that's definitely a hot take, one that I know a lot of people are going to disagree with because there are a lot of people that don't love Quinn Ewers, but at the end of the day, I think there are so many things going for him going into this year, and I think he's going to put up numbers that are just going to be downright silly. I feel pretty confident about that, but that'll do it for this edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It does make a huge difference. Also, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, all the social pages for all the content and updates you could possibly need. We have really incredible people doing awesome work across every single sport you could want. So anything in the world of sports, come on over to GSMC and we have you totally covered. But thank you once again for listening, and I will see you guys tomorrow for even more Week 1 predictions.